This is the story of a house that for 3 centuries has been home to great principles of American life: freedom, tolerance, and opportunity. In particular, it is the story of 5 of its owners: a pioneer, a patriot, a conservationist, a craftsman, and an activist. Gomez Mill House was originally built as a frontier trading post by a man of extraordinary times, Luis Moses Gomez. Luis began his life in 1654 in Madrid as the child of Isaac Gomez, a celebrated Jewish financier to King Philip IV. Unable to protect his trusted advisor from the Spanish Inquisition, King Philip sent a coded warning to Isaac: "Las cebollas están apestando." The onions are beginning to smell. Isaac's wife Esther and their infant son Luis fled to the close-knit Jewish community of Bayonne, France. Isaac, however, was imprisoned by the Inquisition. Isaac escaped to France in 1668, and Luis's education in the great Jewish merchant traditions continued. In the late 1680s, Luis, now a married man, moved to England and expanded the family business. And by 1688, he was living in Jamaica, overseeing an international merchant operation. In the early 1700s, Luis settled in New York City with his second wife, Esther Marchese, of Kingston, Jamaica. With his sons married into distinguished families in Jamaica, Curacao, and Barbados, his enterprises stretched throughout the Atlantic Basin. A highly respected New Yorker, Gomez owned city properties, mercantile establishments, and cargo ships. Fashionable citizens now enjoyed his imported French silks and food, Portuguese wines, and other household commodities. Known for his generosity, civil leadership, and wise counsel, Gomez was one of 6 Jews who contributed funds to rebuild the steeple at Trinity Church in 1711. He negotiated land exchanges with New York's free slave community, and, as Parnas of New York's earliest Jewish congregation, Shereth Israel, he led the effort to build the first Jewish house of worship in North America, Mill Street Synagogue. In 1705, Gomez petitioned the British government for an act of denization. Authorized by Queen Anne, the act declares,
"Luis Gomez and his heirs may acquire and receive, use and enjoy each and all liberties, franchises, and privileges as any of your loyal and faithful subjects born within this kingdom, without hindrance or vexation by your administrators or officers."
This document, for which he paid £58 British sterling, about $25,000 in modern U.S. currency, allowed him the freedom to purchase property and conduct business as a non-citizen of the British colony without interference. In the autumn of 1714, Luis Moses Gomez, at the age of 60, sailed up the Hudson River with his sons Jacob and Daniel to purchase property in the Hudson Valley. The location Gomez chose crossed Ulster and Orange counties, near the famous Teufel-Danskammer Point, the Devil's Dance Chamber. First reported by Henry Hudson's crew in 1609, the ceremonial ground where they observed Native Americans dancing and chanting by firelight is perched high up on the western riverbank. Gomez built his trading post inland on the western border of his property. The 2-foot-thick stone walls were built against a hillside, and 2 large storage rooms were dug out to secure goods. At opposite ends of the blockhouse, he constructed immense open-hearth fireplaces for warmth, cooking, and lighting, as only faint natural light came through the deep-set windows. Settlers, and the few remaining Native Americans who came to the trading post, purchased imported woven fabrics, European-style clothing, and household staples in exchange for furs and local produce. Along the Hudson, Gomez enterprises included lime kilns and a sawmill. A grist mill was built near the trading post on the stream known as Jews Creek. Daniel and Jacob purchased additional properties nearby, adding to the family fortunes. In 1740, Luis died, and by 1748 the trading post and all other holdings were sold. The oldest existing Jewish dwelling in North America entered the next stage in its distinctly American story. By 1772, when Wilfred Ecker bought the old trading post, American colonials had grown hostile to British tyranny. Ecker, whose ancestry dated back to New Netherlands at the time of Peter Stuyvesant, was a successful entrepreneur and civic leader who established his new home as a center for revolutionary activism. Gathered in his parlor on Sundays, patriots would discuss the latest revolutionary and local news. It is said that Ecker would remove the family Bible from its Bible box and read inspirational passages to his guests. Perhaps they also prayed for safe passage home, as unfriendly loyalists often waited in ambush along the country roads. To welcome his fellow patriots, Ecker created a parlor on one side of the trading post and a dining area on the other. With a family of 6 children underway, Ecker added wooden floors, a second story with 4 bedrooms, a hillside entrance to the upper level with a grand center hallway, and a high-gabled slate-roofed attic. Bricks for the addition were fired on the property. Look to the east end of the house for a trace of his ancestry. A heart and diamond symbolizing peace on earth. When finished, the Gomez stone trading post had become Ecker's gracious 18th-century manor house. Ecker received commissions in the Newburgh and Marlborough militias. In 1775, he was the first to volunteer for the Newburgh Committee of Safety and Observation, created to monitor local political loyalties. As committee chairman, he conducted door-to-door visits to record allegiances of all residents and recruited patriots. He reported those who resisted as disloyal. Ecker developed prosperous businesses, with the grist mill and lime kilns left by Gomez. After the war, his packet and ferryboat service transported cargo and passengers across the Hudson. In 1786, as Justice of the Peace in Marlborough, Ecker presided over one of the first cases in U.S. history regarding slavery. Jonathan Belknap petitioned to free his slave Peter. Ecker's ruling declared Peter to be of sound mind and body and pronounced him free. Ecker died in 1799, and Millhouse was sold following his son William's death in 1827. When Robert Fulton's steamboat appeared in 1807, it ushered in a new age of shipping, sightseeing, and a century of breathtaking change on the river. The Hudson Valley became a fashionable place to live, and the next owners of Gomez Millhouse now entered the scene. In 1835, Captain Edward Armstrong, son of Colonel William Armstrong, a British officer in the American Revolution and War of 1812, purchased the Millhouse property. Edward previously acquired other nearby lands that included the Danscomer Point, where he built a mansion of the same name. Edward invited his friend and neighbor, renowned landscape designer A.J. Downing, to transform the Armstrong properties into pastoral settings surrounded by idyllic stone walls. In 1853, Edward's widow, Sarah, willed the Gomez property to their eldest son, William Henry. As an adventurer, he had sailed for Hong Kong on a China clipper, crossed the Painted Desert, sought gold as a 49er in California, and explored Europe. Henry returned to Marlborough in 1862 with his southern wife, Mattie. He raised thoroughbred horses, cultivated acres of orchards, and wrote a war novel sympathetic to the North entitled Red Tape and Pigeonhole Generals. Henry added the 2-story kitchen wing, removed the hillside from the back of the house, and replaced the storage rooms with 2 new family rooms. But the apple of his eye was his beautiful daughter, Emily. In 1873, tragedy struck the Armstrong family. While out running with her dog, Twist, Emily, age 5, fell, struck her head on a stone, and died. Harry and Mattie never recovered from losing their only child. They and most of their close-knit family are buried at Christ Church in Marlborough, where stained-glass windows, designed by William Henry's younger brother, Maitland, watched over them. The great furniture designer Gustav Stickley, a friend of fellow Roycroft artisan John Staples, recommended Millhouse to its 4th remarkable owner, Dard Hunter. Dard came from a multi-talented Midwestern family with interests in newspapers, pottery, and cabinetry. As a child, he was already skilled in all of these. But in his teens, he ran away from his father's workshop to travel with his older brother, an itinerant magician. By his 20s, Dard found his true calling, papermaking. And while living abroad with his wife Edith, he studied it extensively. When Dard and his wife acquired the mill house from John Staples in 1912, all that remained of the Gomez and Ecker mills were a dam and 2 discarded millstones. Dard set the millstones into the lawn as stepping stones and built himself a small paper mill at the dam. The mill, designed in the style of an English cottage, was fashioned from old oak beams and leftover brick from the walkways. Never one to cut corners, Dard grew his own ryegrass for the thatched roof. Inside the mill, he created a complete paper-making system. On a day with enough water running in the brook to turn the water wheel, Dard could produce several sheets of handmade paper. Dard imprinted designs known as watermarks into his paper as the pulp dried against the wax and wire molds. They were distinct and autobiographical, including self-portraits, his initials, and images of the mill house. He hung the paper to dry in the mill or attic. On days when the water was too low to make paper, Dard devised homemade inks and carved letterforms in the room above the kitchen. Using his own paper, type, and early hand press, Dard produced 2 remarkable books at the mill house, the first books entirely handmade by one person since the invention of type. In 1918, needing a far more powerful mill, the Hunters regretfully sold the mill house. Martha Gruning, the last historically significant owner of the mill house, was a journalist, author, suffragist, lawyer, and social activist. She purchased Gomez Mill House in 1918 with an inheritance from her father. Gruning was born into a family concerned with the ills of society. Her father, a prominent physician, ministered to wealthy clientele, but also opened free clinics. Martha's sister Clara started the first American family planning organization with Mary Dennett, and her sister Rose ran a settlement house. Her brother Ernest edited The Nation, to which Martha submitted many articles. Martha was motivated by a desire to right the wrongs of society. She joined over 90 activist organizations, but spoke in her unique, independent voice. Martha co-authored articles for the NAACP magazine The Crisis with her friend W.E.B. Du Bois. She led suffragist protests, reported live from the Civil Disobedience March of East St. Louis, and investigated the Houston riot of 1917. Martha's plan was to create a libertarian school at Gomez Mill House for children of diverse backgrounds, including her adopted son David. Martha's dream for the school was never realized, and in 1925 she sold Mill House to continue her work abroad. The Mill House continued to thrive locally, first as an inn, then as the private home of Jeffrey and Mildred Starrin. In 1973, Mildred, an antique dealer, fought for the site's preservation and succeeded in placing the Mill House on the National Register of Historic Places as the oldest Jewish dwelling in North America and as the oldest historic home in Orange County, New York. Gomez descendants established a foundation in 1979, and in 1984 purchased the mill house from Mildred and opened it to the public as a museum. Today, the descendants of Gomez, Ecker, Armstrong, and Hunter continue to take an active interest in the mill house. These days, you may see how paper is made by hand, listen to a Sunday program on a fascinating topic, or meet one of the many school classes that visit the site each year. The Gomez Mill House and the Dard Hunter Mill, with their original artifacts, are national treasures not to be missed. Come join us. Explore America's story of freedom, tolerance, and opportunity through the unique and inviting Gomez Mill House Museum and Historic Site.